She came out of nowhere like a spark in the night, fierce, fearless, and unapologetic. Pam Grier wasn't just an actress. She was a revolution wrapped in denim shorts and a loaded weapon. She embodied the raw power of the 1970s Blaxploitation era, headlining films at a time when most black actresses struggled to find a single leading role. She was the Avenger in Coffy, the vigilante in Foxy Brown, and the unstoppable presence in Sheba, Baby. On screen, she looked untouchable, as though no man or system could ever break her spirit, and then at the height of her fame, she vanished. The star who had once personified an entire genre seemed to slip away from the Hollywood machine, leaving fans wondering what could make such a blazing force go dark. Was it personal choice, industry pressure, or something deeper, like the quiet blacklisting of a woman who refused to conform? This is the story of how Pam Grier took an industry by the throat, shook it up, and paid the price. She challenged stereotypes, mesmerized audiences, and influenced generations of performers. But behind the iconic movie posters and tough girl swagger was a complex individual battling more than just on-screen villains. She faced studio executives who saw her as a commodity, a public more fascinated with her body than her talent, and health struggles that threatened her life. Most of all, she confronted a system unprepared for an outspoken black woman who refused to play by the old rules. Let's reveal the unstoppable rise, sudden disappearance, and enduring legacy of the true queen of Blaxploitation cinema. Pamela Suzette Grier was born on May 26, 1949, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, into a family with a heritage as richly woven as the tapestry of America itself: African-American, Hispanic, Chinese, Filipino, and Cheyenne. This diverse background gave her a look that captivated people from the start, but it also meant she would face ignorance and prejudice from multiple angles. Her father was in the U.S. Air Force, resulting in a childhood filled with constant relocations, from Colorado to England and back again. In Denver, where she spent her formative years, she discovered a resilience that would later define her characters on screen. She learned to adapt quickly, to assert herself in unfamiliar environments, and to hold her head high when others tried to diminish her. Even as a young girl, Pam had a sense of performance in her blood. She participated in local beauty pageants, not just for the chance at a crown, but to build confidence and presence. She was tall, striking, and possessed an innate poise that set her apart. She also carried trauma from an early assault, an experience she's spoken about in her autobiography, Foxy, My Life in 3 Acts. Rather than break her spirit, that horrific incident fueled a determination to never be victimized again. Over time, that fierce resolve found its way into the tough-as-nails heroines she would portray. Her initial path to Hollywood began somewhat by accident when she landed a receptionist job at American International Pictures. It was there that she was discovered by director Jack Hill, who saw in her not just beauty, but an electrifying screen presence waiting to be unleashed. Few people recognized it at the time, but Pam Grier was about to change the face of cinema. She was the right person at the right moment in American film history, when the industry was about to pivot into the wild, rebellious terrain of the 1970s. But that wasn't the whole story. The 1970s ushered in the age of Blaxploitation, a subgenre of film that emerged from the civil rights era and played to black audiences hungry for representation, no matter how gritty. These movies often featured pimps, pushers, and vigilantes in rough neighborhoods, with storylines heavy on revenge and justice. Studio executives, seeing dollar signs, pumped out low-budget projects aimed at urban theaters. But for many black viewers, these films offered the first chance to see themselves as heroes, even if the portrayal sometimes leaned into stereotypes. Amidst that cinematic chaos, Pam Grier rose like a phoenix. She starred in a string of hits: Coffy, 1973, and Foxy Brown, 1974, chief among them, playing a new kind of heroine. She was a nurse-turned-avenger in Coffy, taking on the drug trade after it harmed her sister. She was the unstoppable Foxy Brown, seeking vengeance for her boyfriend's murder. In both roles, she embodied a woman who didn't need a man's protection or society's approval. Her characters were fearless, physically strong, and sexually liberated, challenging both mainstream Hollywood's expectations and the more conservative norms within the black community. It was unprecedented. While white women on screen were often damsels or decorative sidekicks, Pam Grier's characters were the center of the action, driving the plot forward through determination and pure grit. Audiences couldn't get enough of her. She quickly became an icon of empowerment, a symbol that a black woman could be front and center without apology. The camera adored her, but her fame wasn't just about her looks. Though she was undeniably stunning, it was about her energy, that intangible spark that told viewers, "I won't be caged." At the same time, the exploitation aspect of these films limited their depth. Pam Grier was well aware that while the roles were empowering in some respects, they also leaned heavily on sex appeal and violence. She pushed back, demanding more nuanced scripts and calling out directors who tried to reduce her to mere eye candy. She wanted her characters to be fully realized individuals, not just the hot babe with a gun. This tension between empowerment and exploitation was the hallmark of her career. She walked that fine line better than anyone else, but she yearned for a day when more holistic roles would come her way. Yet that day didn't arrive as swiftly as it should have. Mainstream Hollywood noticed Pam Grier's success. The profits these blaxploitation films generated were no joke, and white-led studios were intrigued by the possibility of tapping into that market. Yet there was a palpable hesitation to fully embrace her. In an era still rife with racial tension, the idea of a strong, gun-toting black woman as a box office draw unsettled many executives. They admired her ferocity, but weren't sure how to package it for the broader American audience that was still predominantly white and often conservative in its tastes. Rumors swirled that she faced pushback for being too strong, too intimidating, or too black. These were the whispered phrases that indicated an industry not yet ready to see a woman of color in roles that overshadowed white co-stars. Pam Grier, for her part, refused to tone herself down. She continued to speak her mind about the scripts offered to her. If she sensed a project was going to degrade her or the image of black women, she walked away. This stance led to fewer offers in the late 1970s and early 1980s, as studios turned their attention to more formulaic blockbusters with safe, bankable leads. Critics began to ask where she had gone, while fans wondered if she had been blacklisted behind closed doors. Grier herself rarely spoke openly about industry conspiracies, but her frustration with the lack of good roles was apparent. She had proven her commercial viability, starred in box office hits, and become a cultural phenomenon, yet big-budget projects eluded her. It was as though Hollywood had used her to spike profits in a niche genre, then quietly set her aside once that niche had run its course. If this was an era of progress, it was painfully selective about who got to benefit long-term. However, even those challenges wouldn't be her greatest fight. By the mid-1980s, Pam Grier's presence in film had dwindled dramatically. Some insiders chalked it up to the blaxploitation trend fizzling out, leaving its stars without a clear path in mainstream Hollywood. Others whispered that her outspoken nature, combined with the changing industry landscape, had soured key decision-makers. But a less visible factor also played a huge role: Grier's personal and health struggles. In 1988, doctors diagnosed her with stage 4 cancer and gave her just 18 months to live. News of this grim prognosis didn't make big headlines at the time. Gossip columns were more interested in sensational stories than a star's quiet battle. Grier faced this crisis with the same ferocity that fueled her characters. Through a combination of surgery, therapy, and an unwavering will to survive, she ultimately beat the odds. By the early 1990s, she was cancer-free, but physically and emotionally drained from the ordeal. When she returned to acting, the world had moved on. Action movies were now dominated by muscle-bound male stars like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. The gritty, low-budget charms of the 1970s had been replaced by big-budget glitz. For a woman who had once headlined entire franchises, being relegated to cameo parts or minor TV roles was disheartening. It seemed as though Hollywood had all but forgotten the queen it had once crowned. But fate had a surprising twist in store, one that would briefly catapult her back into the spotlight, and what happened next would shock everyone. In 1997, Quentin Tarantino resurrected Pam Grier's career with Jackie Brown, a film that was essentially a love letter to the blaxploitation era. Tarantino, a well-known cinephile with a particular affection for 1970s pulp, recognized Grier's star power. Casting her as Jackie Brown, a flight attendant caught up in a smuggling operation, was a stroke of genius. Grier's natural poise and subtle intensity suited the role perfectly, and audiences were reminded of why she had been such a phenomenon. The film garnered critical acclaim, and Pam Grier earned Golden Globe and Screen Actors Guild nominations for her performance. Suddenly, her name was back in mainstream conversation. People spoke of her as a legend returning to claim her throne. Yet, once the awards season buzz passed, Hollywood didn't exactly roll out the red carpet for her future endeavors. She landed a few roles in smaller films and guest spots on TV shows, but nothing that replicated the success of Jackie Brown. It was as if the industry wanted to pay brief homage to a past icon without fully recommitting to her stardom. Still, Grier took this mini comeback in stride. She was grateful to be working again and to be recognized for more than just her blaxploitation legacy. In interviews, she emphasized that she wasn't just Foxy Brown anymore. She was an actress with range, ready for the next chapter. But major studios remained cautious, typecasting her into either maternal figures or minor tough woman roles. The Renaissance fans hoped for never truly materialized, reinforcing the idea that Hollywood was more comfortable celebrating Pam Grier in retrospect than investing in her future. But that wasn't the last chapter of her influence. Despite the ups and downs of her career, Pam Grier's impact extended far beyond the frames of her movies. She changed how Black women saw themselves in film, no longer confined to secondary roles or docile stereotypes, but capable of leading an entire feature with bravado and wit. She also demonstrated that a female action star could resonate with both men and women, bridging the gap between feminist messages and mass entertainment. Her influence can be seen in the careers of artists like Beyoncé, who channeled Pam Grier's unapologetic sass and power in music videos, and Missy Elliott, who often cited Grier's fearless persona as an inspiration. Contemporary actresses like Regina King, Viola Davis, and Issa Rae have all spoken about how Grier's work paved the way for the multidimensional Black female leads we see today. Some have pointed specifically to her command over her own image. She refused to be anything less than the star of her show. Grier's personal life also generated intrigue. She had high-profile relationships with Richard Pryor and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, among others, which she candidly discussed in her autobiography, Foxy, My Life in 3 Acts. In that memoir, she opened up about the complexities of navigating Hollywood's double standards, her health scare, and her journey toward self-acceptance. She also became an advocate for women's health, speaking out about her cancer battle and encouraging early detection. This role as a spokesperson for empowerment, both physical and emotional, only cemented her status as a trailblazer. Today, she lives relatively quietly on a ranch in Colorado, far from the bustle of Hollywood, but her presence remains. Directors occasionally approach her for cameo roles or homages, and a new generation of filmmakers references her iconic scenes in everything from comedic spoofs to edgy dramas. The rumor mill periodically churns about possible appearances in reboots or sequels, but Grier remains selective, picking projects that speak to her ongoing legacy rather than overshadow it. After all, Pam Grier never settled for less than she deserved, but was she ever really gone, or did Hollywood just stop listening? Pam Grier didn't truly disappear. She was sidelined by an industry that loved her audacity when it was profitable, but didn't know how to handle her once the era of cheap exploitation flicks ended. She had the star power of a leading lady, but major studios balked at the idea of a strong Black woman who wouldn't play the demure sidekick. She fought for better scripts, challenged stereotypes, and refused to let her image be molded into anything that undermined her or her community. That kind of conviction often rubs the system the wrong way, especially when you're a woman of color. In many ways, Pam Grier remains the quintessential example of what happens when an artist is ahead of her time. The 1970s were too narrow a period to contain her potential, and by the time the culture evolved enough to appreciate her fully, the industry had moved on to new trends. Yet her footprint never went away. She's the silent architect behind every tough, charismatic Black heroine that's graced screen since. Her spirit echoes in every action scene where a woman stands her ground, unafraid of men or the powers that be. Ultimately, it might be said that Pam Grier is exactly where she wants to be, outside the machine's control, still holding her head high. She remains a legend who didn't need 100 blockbusters to define her career. One look at Coffy or Foxy Brown is enough to remind fans of the unstoppable force she brought to cinema. The question is, did Hollywood fail Pam Grier, or was she just too real for the script they tried to write for her? Wherever the truth lies, it's clear that her story isn't just about a single actress. It's about an entire generation of Black performers who fought for visibility in a system that thrived on their invisibility. Pam Grier emerged triumphant in her own way, leaving behind a legacy that still resonates. For anyone questioning the power of representation, all you have to do is watch her kick down a door, on screen or in life, and realize she was never just an actress. She was, and is, a movement all her own.